In this video, we're going over 21 ultra rare $1 bills that are worth a ton of money. This is the only video on $1 bills you'll ever need, so make sure you save it and come back to it whenever you need. Some of the bills we go over have the smallest little detail that you need to pay attention to that can mean the difference of thousands of dollars. Without wasting any more time, let's hop right into this video. So this $1 bill from series 1977A sold for $1,410. By the way, as a reminder, stick around until the end because I'm going to tell you exactly what to do and how to sell one of these notes if you end up finding one at the end of the video. But this bill that sold for $1,410 has a pretty small detail that allowed it to sell for this much money. Now I want you to take a moment and leave a comment down below as to why you think this bill sold for this much money. I'll give you a second, go ahead. All right, so the biggest reason why this bill sold for $1,410 is because it is a mismatched serial number error. So you need to know this. During the printing process of paper money, the first print is the back of the bill. The second print is the front where you see all the black ink, and the third and final print is the overprint, which includes the district seal on the left, the treasury seal on the right, the serial numbers, and the district number in 4 different areas around the bill. On this one, you can see they are black number 1s. So if you look at the first 5 serial numbers in this bill on the bottom left, it says 97250, and at the serial number on the top right, it says 86139. As we know, those serial numbers should be identical, but they are not, so this is considered to be a mismatched serial number, which is the main reason why it sold for so much money. Now you have to remember as well that condition is super important. You need to understand that the grading scale for paper money goes from 1 all the way up into 70. This bill got into the 65 EPQ grade, meaning that there is not a single fold anywhere on the bill. Now as soon as there's a fold anywhere on this bill, it will go from uncirculated down to almost uncirculated 58. If this bill would have graded at a 58, it would have brought significantly less money. So what do you do if you find this bill? Well, the first thing is you don't want to damage it or fold it. So I recommend putting it in a currency holder that is PVC free. Now, if you don't have a currency holder lying around, for the time being, you can put it in a flat book to make sure that the bill does not get folded. You don't want to put this in your wallet or purse because it can damage the bill. Now, I'll tell you this, if you put your banknote in a book, don't forget about it. This sounds silly, but I've actually bought used books before and found old paper money inside that's actually valuable. Now, if you're looking for PVC-free currency holders, you can find them online. If you want to know what I recommend, I have a link below that says old money prices supplies. You can click on that link, but you don't have to do that. Just find some way to keep your notes flat and don't damage them, because remember, this bill sold for $1,410. I'm not going to spend too much time on this specific $1 bill, but this one sold for $5,280. So a few things on this one. First of all, to get the elephant out of the room, you can see that the serial number here is a solid number 8 serial number. That means that every single digit is an 8. You can have solid 1s all the way up into solid 9s. This is considered to be a fancy serial number. Now, fancy serial numbers can come in a wide range of different types, but an interesting fact is that the number 8 is actually considered to be a lucky number in certain countries like in Asia. There are collectors out there that will pay a large premium if your bill has the number 8s on them. The more 8s you have on your bill, the more money it's generally going to be worth. Now, something very important to point out here that not many people know about is that this specific bill was produced at the Fort Worth facility in Texas. How do you know that? Well, if you look at the plate position on the front bottom right corner of the bill, you will see a small FW. If you see that, your bill is from the Fort Worth facility. Now, if you look everywhere on your $1 bill and you do not see FW anywhere, that means that bill was produced at the Washington, D.C. facility. Now, that's really important because Fort Worth and Washington, D.C. will produce different quantities of bills. Generally speaking, the less quantity produced, the more demand there will be for that specific bill. This banknote only graded 2 points away from the perfect grade of 70. So from 60 all the way to 70, there has to be no folds on the bill, but to get a higher grade, the centering of the bill needs to be very equal to each other. For example, if you look at left to right or top to bottom, the margins are generally equal here, which allowed it to grade at the 68 grade, and this $1 bill sold for $5,280. This $1 bill sold for $6,600, and here's why. So first of all, do you see a small FW anywhere on the bill? If you look closely, there is not, so that means this bill was produced at the Washington, D.C. facility. Next, you'll notice someone wrote on this bill, and you can see the bill looks pretty beat up and dirty. This means that this $1 bill circulated and it passed many people's hands before someone saw it and snatched it up because they noticed that this was a serial number 1 bill. Serial number 1 bills are incredibly rare and sought after because it is the first bill on the sheet of banknotes when they're producing them. Also, this is a star note. You can see at the end of the serial number there is a small little star. That means that this note is considered to be a replacement note. So star note or replacement note are interchangeable. What you need to know is that during the printing process, sometimes these large sheet of bills can have an error or damage on them. So what happens is a quality control manager will put a large rejection mark on the sheet, which means that sheet of bills needs to be thrown away and destroyed. So for bookkeeping purposes and to prevent any theft, they need to reproduce the sheet of bills that they destroyed. They do this by making a star note sheet. Now this is how it goes. The less errors or mistakes on a specific run, the less star notes there are going to be, which means the higher the demand. For example, if they had to destroy 50,000 sheets, that means there's going to be a lot of star notes out there for a specific run. Now I'm going to tell you something else that's important. When you see, for example, on this bill, it says series 2003, that does not specifically mean when that bill is produced. For example, banknotes that say 2017 on them are still being produced today. So the date on the bill pretty much means when they produced the printing plate for that specific series. Now they don't want to do this every single year because they don't want to have to produce a new printing plate every single time. That's really important to know, and not many people understand that. So honestly, if this bill was in better condition, it didn't have that writing there. You see the 50 to the left of Washington there. If it was in much better condition, it would have brought a whole lot more money than $6,600. But this next note right here is in really good condition. It's the same thing, but it is not a star note. It is from the series of 1977. And this $1 bill that graded at a 67 EPQ sold for $11,162.50. Now there is a high probability that if the note was a star note as well, it would have brought more money, which segues into another part I want to tell you about, which is market conditions. When you sell your banknote is incredibly important, guys. Make sure that if you're going to sell your banknote, you sell it during a market high and not a market low. Well, how do you know when that is? Essentially, you have to have a good grasp on how much these bills are selling for in general, but a good rule of thumb, for example, during the housing market crash of 2007, 8, and 9, collectible currency went down the drain in value with the housing market. But this is not always a one-to-one correlation. For example, in 2021, during the pandemic, people thought the market was going to crash again like it did in the housing market. But surprisingly, the exact opposite happened. People actually started buying collectible currency and the market was extremely hot. Collectibles were selling for more money than they had ever sold for in history. So having a good grasp on the market is incredibly important when it comes to selling your bills. But the main reason again why this bill sold for $11,162.50 is because it is a serial number 1, it is a high grade, and it's incredibly hard to get that serial number 1 bill. This $1 bill sold for $2,400, and this is why. So honestly, a lot of people don't know what to look for when it comes to rare $1 bills. So what you need to know is that in the 70s, they were testing out different types of paper for producing banknotes like this. So this was produced on Natick test paper. There's a multitude of reasons why the Bureau of Engraving and Printing would do this. One of them being to see how well the paper would hold up in circulation, or possibly they were having supply chain issues back then and they weren't able to get enough paper, so they wanted to have a backup plan in case there was ever an emergency. But essentially, the way you can tell that you have one of these really rare bills is by the serial number. Now, the way to tell is for this $1 bill is by the block of the serial number range. So if you have a 1977A, you want to look for bills that start with a letter E and end with a letter H. Now from there, the numbers in between need to be 76,001 all the way through 80,640,000. That is the serial number range that these Natick test paper notes fall within. So if you have a 1977A $1 bill that falls within that range, you have a Natick test paper note that's incredibly rare, so keep your eyes out for this one. I'm going to touch on this one briefly, but as we know, if we look closely, this is also a Fort Worth produced banknote. You can see that by the small FW there, remember? Now this bill sold for $12,000, and the main reason is because this is a solid number 9 serial number. Now what's cool about the solid number 9 serial number number is that the next number should be, as long as there's not a printing error, it should be in serial number 1. Now on this specific note, it will start with a J, and when it goes to the serial number 1, it'll end with a letter B instead of an A. So when they're producing these banknotes, they go from serial number 1 all the way up to a solid number 9, and then the suffix letter, in this case an A, will go to the next letter in the alphabet, which is a B. Then it'll go from J, serial number 1, B, all the way up to J, solid number 9, B, and then after that, it's going to go to a serial number 1 that ends with the suffix of C. I hope that made sense, but essentially it's an endless run, and that suffix letter there goes from A all the way to Z, depending on how large the print run is. But pretty much what you need to know is that this is a solid number 9 serial number, and it sold for $12,000. This is cool. So this bill sold for $3,360. If you ever find anything that looks like this, please hold on to it because it is rare. So if you look on the left-hand side of the bill, you're going to see that there looks like there's an extra piece of paper there, along with the fact that the district seal and the serial number are missing. Well, it's actually not missing. That print is on the other side of the bill. So what happened here very quickly? During the printing process, part of the sheet got folded and printed on in between the second and third process of the print run. So remember, the back of the bill is the first print, the front of the bill is the second print, and the third print is the overprint. So after the second print was produced, when it was going to the third and final print, which is the overprint, somehow the paper got folded over and printed on, and then someone found it and folded it back, and it caused this error to be there. Because this is a printed fold error, it sold for $3,360. So there are 100 $1 bills here, and they sold for $47,437, guys. So pretty much what you need to know is that this is a serial number 1 all the way up to serial number 100. It's a full pack of bills. Now, if you go to your local bank, there's a probability that if you ask for a fresh pack of $1 bills, you could get some pretty rare serial numbers. Now, if you're a bank teller or bank clerk and you know this information, you have a clear advantage over customers because you can get first dibs at something like this. Another thing you could do is that if you're friends with someone at a local bank, you could ask them to always keep an eye out for bills like this. If you think this information is useful, feel free to share this video. But let's go on to the next one. So the back of this $1 bill looks pretty normal. This one sold for $3,000. It's when you flip the bill over to the front, you can notice that the bill looks completely blacked out. And that's because this is a test note error. I'm going to keep this very brief, but during the printing process, they'll essentially open the flood area and flood out the entire sheet with black ink just to test to make sure that the ink is running properly. Now, a bill like this should have never gotten out of the facility, but it accidentally did, and it allowed this note to sell for $3,000. So if you find a bill like this, hold on to it, keep it safe, because it is very rare. This $1 bill sold for $1,840, and here's why. So the first thing you'll notice is that there is red specimen stamps on this bill, both on the front and the back. You'll also notice that the serial number is an ascending ladder. That means it goes from 2 consecutively all the way up into 9. Now, when it comes to specimen notes, these were produced for different banks around the world as a sample for the bank tellers to make sure that if they ever received a US paper currency, they could check it to make sure that the example they were given by a customer was indeed genuine. These were never meant to get out into collectors' hands, but you know how things go sometimes. One thing led to another, and someone probably sold this bill to a collector for a good amount of money. Later, it ended up in this auction and sold for $1,840. Now, I will say this. You may be thinking to yourself, what's stopping someone from just stamping on a little specimen stamp? Well, first of all, this is not any sort of legal advice whatsoever, but you're pretty much defacing US federal currency, which is illegal. And if you're doing it with intent to sell for higher amounts, it's fraud. So simply don't do it. On top of that, if you have a bill like this, you're going to want to send it off to a grading company like PCGS or PMG. Now, this bill is graded by CGA, which I'm not the biggest fan of, simply because CGA, the company, is no longer around. But a company like PMG or PCGS have been around for decades, and they will continue to be here forever. So moral of the story is, if you find a specimen note, you're going to want to get it graded because this example sold for $1,840. All right, this 1963 $1 bill sold for $1,920, and it's the smallest little detail you got to pay attention to see if you have this bill. So essentially, this is what collectors call a mule note. So how this happens is, like I said before, during the printing process, they will produce the back of the bills first, So typically they'll print thousands of sheets of just the back, where the back is printed but the front is blank. Now, as you can see on the back, there's a small little backplate number. Now, internally at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, they have it aligned so the backplate number will correspond with the front plate number in terms of the size and which specific series that back should go on. So moral of the story here is the back of this bill should have never had the front printed on it like this. So if you're looking at the backplate number, it should be a different size than the front plate number located here. That is a good way to tell if you have a mule note or not. That in combination with the fact that this is a very high grade allowed it to sell for $1,920. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but essentially this $1 1988 bill sold for $4,560, and the main reason is because this is a misalignment error. So the back of the bill was printed fine, the front of the bill was printed fine as well, but when they cut the bill, they cut it improperly, and then it got to the third print, which is the overprint. They aligned the overprint where it should be. So it's a bit of a confusing error, but something like this is 100% genuine, and it was graded by PMG at an AU 55, which means about uncirculated, and it also means there's likely some folds on the bill or at least some very heavy handling or bends somewhere on the bill. That's why you got to keep your bills very flat and safe, like I said before. All right, so one of the most under the radar bills out there, this $1 bill sold for $4,200, and here's why. So we already know what a star note is, or a replacement note. It's when a sheet of bills has an error on it, they destroy the sheet and make a replacement note sheet like this. You can see the star there. So pretty much during the 80s, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing were testing new ways to print paper money. What they did was they started producing bills the same way they make newspapers, which is on one continuous long roll of paper. They thought this would be much more efficient and faster to produce more banknotes. What ended up happening was a massive amount of errors on these bills because of this new process. This type of printing resulted in these bills, which are called web notes. Now, there are 3 different ways to see if you have a web note or not. Now, if you have one of these, you pretty much have all 3, but essentially the first indicator is Washington. His face is going to look a bit washed out. No pun intended there, Washington, but you can see the difference here. Next, the front plate number is going to be missing the letter. On normally issued bills, the front plate number will always have a letter as well. This one only has a number. Lastly, and probably the easiest way to tell if you have a web note or not, is the back plate number. Simply, on web notes, the back plate number is in the wrong position. It's to the right of In God We Trust. It should not be there. So if you have a banknote where the back plate number is to the right of In God We Trust like this, you have a web note, guys. Please keep it very safe, keep it flat. It's going to be worth good money, especially if it grades this highly and it's a star note, because this example sold for $4,200. Not going to spend too much time here, but looking at the back of this bill, nothing's wrong here, but it sold for $5,280, and I wonder why that is. When you flip it over, you can see that there's an offset printing happening on this bill. Now, it's incredibly important to get your banknote graded by PCGS or PMG, like I've said before, because there are people out there that will try to replicate this error to make it look genuine and sell it for good money. You can see this one was graded by PCGS at a 45 PPQ, which means extremely fine. And this 45 grade typically means there's going to be about 3 folds somewhere on the bill. So all it takes is 3 folds for your bill to get this low of a grade. If it would have graded at the uncirculated grade, it would have brought way more money than $5,280. Now, this is personally one of my favorite types of errors when it comes to paper money. This is what we like to call a retained obstruction error. So what happened here, we have to remember the printing process again, guys. The back of the bill is printed first, the front of the bill is printed second, and the overprint is printed third. So with all that in mind, at what stage of the process did this obstruction get on the bill? Let me know down in the comments below if you got it right, but it happened in between the second printing and the third printing. How do you know that? Well, if it happened before the second printing, you would still be able to see the full portrait of Washington there, but you can see the obstruction is blocking about 25% of it, as well as other areas on the bill. But you can see there that the overprint was printed on top of this obstruction. Now, this is very important. If you ever have any sort of obstruction on your bill like this, do not remove it. Why? Because removing it will take away the cool factor and nobody will know what was being retained on the bill. For example, if you removed this, you wouldn't see part of the district seal on the left. Pretty much anything on the obstruction wouldn't be there, but the second print would be underneath. So it's not as cool looking if the obstruction is gone versus if it is retained, like this example. Such a cool error. If you ever find it, I'd be very jealous of you because it's worth a lot of money, just like this one that sold for $4,465. Not spending too much time on this 1963 $1 $1 bill, but it is a solid number 9 serial number that graded at a PMG 65 EPQ, and it sold for $16,800 for a solid number 9 serial number. So looking at the back of the bill, nothing too alarming to allow it to sell for $7,200, but it's when you flip the bill over to the front, you can see the second print, and only the second print, is doubled. This is a very rare error, especially at the 66 grade like this one. All these things combined allowed it to sell for $7,200. So this is pretty unique. This bill sold for $14,400, and here's why. So this is a mismatched serial number error, and the correct term is a LEPE press error, or LEPE, which stands for Large Examining Printing Equipment. So at the time, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing switched their equipment to this LEPE machine, which was capable of accepting both 32 and 50 subject sheets. This is a very rare error, and you never really see it too often, but if you find it, just understand that it is indeed a very unique error. And remember what I was saying earlier, bills that say 2017 on them are still being produced today. So this bill you see here could have actually been printed very recently, and the crazy part about this, I love when I see it, but it's not that good for the value, is that this one graded by PMG at an AU 50, which means someone found the bill out in circulation. Someone had folded it and it was crossing people's hands before someone very quickly noticed that something was wrong here, and they had a nice day because they turned $1 bill into $14,400. Now before I forget, I promised I'd tell you how to sell your bills if you find them. Well, this example right here sold for $21,600. This is essentially a multiple impressions error, incredibly challenging to find, but if you find it, you found something worth a lot of money. So what are the steps that I would take if I was you? Well, the first thing you want to do, again, make sure you do not damage the condition. Don't get it in a lower grade because the condition is so important on these collectible items. Next, you're going to want to get it sent off to a third-party company like PCGS or PMG. I personally recommend PMG, but that's just my opinion. After that, you have a few options here. Actually, before that, if you want to sell it incredibly quickly and you need the cash, what you could do is you could go to a local coin shop and see how much they'll pay you. Now, I don't recommend going to a pawn shop because they typically do not have specific knowledge, and a lot of the time they won't offer you the true value of the bill. So if you need money fast, what I would do is I'd go to at least 3 different coin shops and see who offers you the most amount of money. If you can wait a little bit longer, what I would do is I would, again, send the banknote off to get graded. From there, I would either sell it on eBay or I would contact an auction house and sell it through there. Now, if you need some assistance doing this, just make sure you find someone trustworthy that can help you. But let's go to the next one. So these two $1 bills sold for $58,750. So long story short on this, there was a bank manager who received 4,000 $1 bills, which is $4,000 face value. And he noticed that the last bill, which should have been a 1 with a bunch of zeros after it, was a solid 0 serial number. So it should have never left the Bureau of Engraving and Printing like this. It is an error. And the cool thing is you can even see on the right hand side of the bill, there is a red BEP rejection mark, meaning they caught it in quality control, but accidentally they forgot to destroy the sheet and it went through the rest of the printing process and out into circulation. So if you ever find a bill that has a solid 0 serial number like this, you're in for a nice treat because this listing right here sold for $58,750. I love this bill. This one little banknote sold for $24,000. Again, you can see this one graded by PCGS at a 40 PPQ. That means this $1 bill went out into circulation and people were handling it before someone spotted the error and was in for a really good time, guys. So as you remember, when we're looking for web notes, we want to look for Washington's face. We want to look for the front plate number that does not have a letter, but only a number. And also the back plate number is to the right of In God We Trust. So this one is indeed a web note, but it's not a normal web note, guys. It is an error web note. If you have not noticed already, the last letter of the serial number is called the suffix. And in this instance, you have an L at the top right and you have a star at the bottom left. This should never happen. If you ever see this, you have an incredibly rare error. And on top of that, it is a web note. It's like it's two awesome things combined in one, which is why this bill sold for $24,000. If you enjoyed this video, share it with a friend, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in future videos.